The room was charged with tension as Commander Morrison's team gathered around the flickering screens. The air crackled with urgency, amplifying the weight of their mission. They had just intercepted a major shipment from a corrupt defense contractor, exposing a network that was far more expansive than they had anticipated. "Here's what we've got," said Torres, her voice steady despite the chaos. She pointed to a series of encrypted files on the screen. This outline revealed contingency strategies these contractors had in place, plans to counteract any significant breach of their operations. "They are ready for us." "This isn't just a defense contractor anymore," Phillips interjected, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the information. "This is a full-blown conspiracy. If they're anticipating our moves, we might be walking into a trap." One of the junior analysts, Tech, looked up from his terminal, eyes wide with realization. What if we create our own counter-strategy? If we can disrupt their communications and target their financial backers, we can weaken their grip before they can react. "Yes," Morrison replied, the gears in his mind turning rapidly. "But we need to act fast. Tech, track their financial transactions. Get us the connections between these contractors and anyone involved in their operations. We need to expose anyone complicit in this mess, no matter how high they are." Just as Tech began the search, an alarm blared from the terminal, a digital alert flashing red across the screens. "Hold on," he said, intensely focused. "I've locked onto a signal indicating that some of the contractors have slipped through our net and are in the process of regrouping. They are planning a counterstrike." "Damn it," Morrison muttered, pacing. "If they are retreating to their safe houses, we can't let them reorganize. We must hit them hard now, before they can solidify their defenses." El Coyote stepped forward, his voice laced with urgency. "If we act quickly, we can dismantle their operations. They'll be reeling from losing key personnel and assets. The moment is ripe to strike. Show them that we're on to them." "That's the spirit," Morrison nodded, his resolve firmer than ever. "Prepare a tactical team. We'll target the safe houses tonight. If we can root out their core leaders, their network will collapse around them." As the team sprang into action, Morrison scanned a digital map on the wall, which displayed the last known locations of the contractors' safe houses. Every cross mark on the map felt like a ticking countdown. With every action they took, the stakes escalated. What if they have outside help? Phillips questioned, his voice a low growl. They could be anticipating our moves and could have set traps. "Good point," Morrison admitted. "We'll use drones to surveil the area. I need eyes on every location before we breach." Just as they began to strategize, the lights in the room flickered ominously, plunging them into momentary darkness before the emergency generators kicked in. The atmosphere shifted, a feeling of encroaching dread filling the space. "Check the perimeter," Morrison commanded sharply. "I don't want any surprises." The tension thickened as agents fan out, weapons drawn. An audible silence enveloped the room, only to be pierced by a frantic voice over the intercom. "Commander, we've got an anomaly in our security feed. There's been a breach. Someone's inside the building." In an instant, alarms rang out, blaring through the entire facility as lights undulated in a frantic red. Morrison, heart racing, instinctively moved toward the nearest exit, ensuring his team followed his lead. "Lock down all entrances," he shouted, urgency clawing at his throat. "We cannot let anyone out or in until we determine who's responsible." The room erupted into action as the agents confirmed the lockdown and began searching for the intruder. Morrison caught El Coyote's eye, a shared understanding passing between them. This was an attack not just on them but on the integrity of their mission. As they secured the facility, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that this breach was more than a mere coincidence. Someone wanted to sabotage their operations, and they were willing to do anything to protect their interests. "Do you think it's one of the contractors?" El Coyote whispered, knowing full well the stakes of their enemies were already inside. "It's a possibility," Morrison muttered, grimly. "But we need more information before we act. Stay sharp." Suddenly, an explosion rocked the facility, the shockwave sending them sprawling to the ground. Dust filled the air, debris raining down as alarm continued to blare. "Get to the command center," Morrison yelled, pushing himself up despite the pain. "We need eyes on this." With chaos reigning around them, Morrison felt the tension shift, a sense of impending betrayal creeping in like a shadow. Whoever was behind this was smarter and more prepared than they had realized. As they regrouped, a chilling thought settled in. What if the real enemy was closer than they had ever thought? Morrison knew they had to uncover the truth before time, and lives ran out. With renewed determination, he led the charge, their battle against corruption taking a turn into a darker, more dangerous game. Chapter 2, The Unexpected Revelation. The dust had only just begun to settle from the explosion when Morrison rallied his team, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We can't waste any time," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We regroup in the command center. We need to figure out where that blast came from and understand who's behind this attack." As they navigated through the wreckage, Morrison's mind raced with possibilities. Had they been compromised from the inside, or was this a desperate act of retaliation from the contractors? The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on his shoulders. Reaching the command center, the team began scanning through surveillance feeds, frantically searching for any sign of the intruder. "We need to identify the breach point," Torres said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "If we can find the entry, we might have a chance to trace back who's orchestrating this." Suddenly, a series of blips appeared on the screen. "Hold on," Torres exclaimed, zooming in on a camera feed. "There! That's our breach point." The image was grainy, but in it, they spotted a cloaked figure slipping into the facility just minutes before the explosion. "Can we enhance this?" Morrison asked, a mix of hope and anxiety coloring his tone. Tech quickly worked on the footage, adjusting the contrast. As the image sharpened, everyone leaned in closer to see the figure, a man, but not just any man. It was one of the high-profile contractors they had thought secure. "This isn't just a random act," Philip said, anger simmering in his voice. "It's calculated. He's sending a message that he's still in control." "Not for long," Morrison growled. "We have to track him down. He's the key to unraveling this whole operation." As they focused on the image, Morrison's mind raced. The fact that this contractor had infiltrated their security meant that he had connections, very powerful connections. "Torres, can we reverse engineer this footage to trace his location?" "I can try," she said, her brow furrowing in concentration. "But we'll need to monitor communication lines. If it's working with someone, we'll catch them in the act," Morrison finished, determination igniting in his voice. "Get those systems up and running." Before they could proceed, another alarm blared, this time signaling an incoming communication. "What now?" Morrison snapped, frustrated as he turned toward the console. "It's an encrypted message from the captured contractor," Tech said, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. "Shall I open it?" "Yes." "Let's see what they have to say," Morrison commanded, the anticipation palpable in the air. The screen flickered, and suddenly the captured contractor's face appeared. His expression was smug, confidence radiating from him like a dark cloud. "Commander Morrison, if you're watching, congratulations on your little victory. But this is just the beginning." "This is a trap," El Coyote murmured, eyes narrowing. "We need to be cautious." "Let him talk," Morrison ordered, his gaze locked on the screen. "Let's see what he's playing at." The contractor continued, tauntingly. "You think you've made a breakthrough, but you're about to lose everything. I have allies in very high places, and your little team is about to be exposed. You have no idea who you're up against. This is bigger than anything you can control." Just then, the screen flickered, and static filled the room. "What the—" Morrison exclaimed, as a connection cut off. "Get me a trace on that signal," he ordered, panic rising in his chest. "We need to find out where that message came from." But before Tech could act, the ground shook violently. The lights flickered again, and the command center went dark for a brief moment. When illumination returned, the team was met with a shocking sight. Every monitor had been hacked, flashing a single ominous line. "You're too late to save yourselves." "Who the hell is doing this?" Morrison shouted, frustration boiling to the surface. As the team scrambled to regain control, they knew one thing for certain. They were in a race against time. Whoever had orchestrated the explosion had also launched a psychological attack aimed at undermining their confidence. "Stay focused," Morrison yelled, rallying them. "We fight back from here. Find out where that contractor is hiding, and let's break this web of betrayal once and for all." With hearts pounding and fear clawing at their resolve, the team refocused their energies. They wouldn't let their enemy crush their spirits. They were determined to turn the tables and expose the entire operation. As they worked, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. This was a game of cat and mouse, and the stakes had never been higher. He could almost hear the whisper of betrayal lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The night was far from over, and the danger was just beginning. Morrison's heart raced as he grasped the gravity of the situation. The taunting message flashed ominously on the screens, a chilling reminder that they were not alone in this fight. "You're too late to save yourselves." The words echoed in his mind as he rallied his team, urgency surging through him like electricity. "Torres, get on the backup systems and restore our feeds. We need eyes on that contractor's last known location and fast." Morrison backed, every second feeling like a lifetime. "Yes, Commander," Torres replied, cracking her knuckles as she dove into the circuits. The rest of the team sprang into action, the air thick with determination. Tech typed furiously at his terminal, trying to bypass the malicious lines that had infiltrated their security. "I'm attempting to breach the encrypted files they left behind," he muttered. "But it's locked tight. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." Morrison clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. "We can't let their threats paralyze us. We're losing precious time. Phillips, I need you to coordinate with the field teams. They should have eyes in the area around the last known location of that contractor." "On it," Phillips replied, his focus sharpening as he tapped into the comms network. He flipped through channels, issuing orders to units positioned outside the facility to sweep the vicinity for this elusive contractor. As the command center filled with the clattering of keyboards and the tense murmurs of agents, the ambient noise of the alarms faded into the background. Morrison's mind raced with possibilities. The contractor's smugness had felt all too familiar. It was a hallmark of someone accustomed to manipulation and deceit. If they didn't act decisively, he would slip through their fingers, leaving chaos in his wake. "Got it!" Torres exclaimed, breaking the tense silence as the lights flickered back to full brightness. The screens lit up with data streams and pictures of the contractor's last known movements. He was last tracked heading to an underground parking garage near the downtown area. Looks like he was trying to find a vehicle to escape. "Then we can't waste any more time." Morrison gestured for the team to gather around. "We'll split into 2 teams. I'll lead one into the city to search the garage. El Coyote, you and Torres stay here and analyze any remaining intel. We need to find out who else is colluding with. Let's move." The team nodded and quickly donned their tactical gear, adrenaline pumping through their veins. Morrison grabbed his gear and turned to his team, each face a mirror of steely resolve. Let's show them that they mess with the wrong people. As they raced out of the command center, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling of being chased. It wasn't just a contractor they were up against. It felt like an entire network of unseen enemies awaited, lurking just around the corners of the city, a web of betrayal that threatened to consume them all. The streets of downtown pulsed with life as Morrison and his team navigated through the urban maze. Their approach was swift and purposeful, blending with the shadows of the city. They arrived at a parking garage, a cold, steel structure that loomed over them like a fortress. "All right, everyone stay alert," Morrison commanded, his heart pounding as they entered. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously above, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. It felt wrong, almost like the silence was bait, waiting for them to stumble into a trap. As they made their way deeper into the garage, Morrison's instincts sharpened. They scanned their surroundings, but the area was suspecting. It felt too quiet. "Check every corner. He could be waiting for us," he whispered, drawing his weapon. The team divided to cover more ground, Morrison taking lead with 2 other agents at his side. They moved methodically, carefully checking each parking stall. With every step, the tension escalated, but there was no sign of their target. Then, in the darkness of the far corner, Morrison spotted a flash of movement. "There!" he hissed, signaling to his teammates. The three of them crept closer, hearts racing, until they reached a car parked haphazardly, engines still warm. Morrison peered through the windows, scanning for any signs of life. The back seat door was slightly ajar, and in that instant, a figure bolted from behind a column, a man sprinting toward the exit. "Stop!" Morrison yelled, adrenaline surging through him as he dashed after the fleeing figure. The agent's instincts kicked in, propelling him into pursuit. The sound of his teammates behind him signaled that they were right on his tail. The man, however, was fast, darting through honking cars and weaving past pedestrians on the street. Morrison pushed himself harder, determination burning in his chest. He wouldn't let him escape again. Just as they neared the exit, the contractor spun around, a flash of a gun visible in his hand. "Stay back!" he shouted, panic lacing his voice as he aimed a weapon at Morrison. "Drop it!" Morrison commanded, raising his own gun, taking careful aim, ready for the threat. "What's the matter, Morrison?" The contractor sneered, fear masked by bravado. "Thought you could take me down? You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Try me," Morrison replied, unwavering. "It's over." Painted against the backdrop of the city surrounding them, the tension thickened, the air vibrating with unfiltered hostility. Morrison's mind raced. This was a standoff. One wrong move, and everything they'd fought for could be lost. In that electric moment, the contractor made a desperate move, ducking into an alleyway and disappearing from view. Morrison cursed under his breath. "After him!" He signaled his teammates to follow, sprinting into the alley, heart pounding in his chest. The alley was narrow and dark, with trash cans lining the walls, creating hazards with each step. Morrison was focused, keenly aware of the stakes. This contractor held vital information that could unravel the entire conspiracy. As they sped through the winding passage, Morrison caught sight of the contractor again at the far end, still running. But as they rounded the corner, nothing could have prepared Morrison for what he encountered. The contractor, cornered and desperate, stood facing a group of men in dark suits. They were armed and waiting, their presence radiating danger and authority. Morrison skidded to a halt, confusion flooding his mind. "Get down!" one of his teammates shouted, but it was too late. The suited men drew their weapons, and the exchange of gunfire erupted in a cacophony of chaos. Morrison's instincts kicked into overdrive as he sought cover, realizing that they were not just confronting Contractor, but an entirely new threat. "We need to regroup," he shouted to his team, adrenaline pumping as they took cover behind a dumpster. As bullets whizzed past them, Morrison's mind darted back to the contractor's earlier message about powerful allies. This was the moment he'd feared. Their enemies had teeth, and it seemed they were ready to bite back. He peeked over the dumpster, scanning for options. "We fight together or we don't fight at all," he said, steeling himself. "On 3, we charge." In that heartbeat, Morrison felt the weight of the world on him. This battle was shaping up to be more than just an operation. It was life or death, a fight for everything they stood for. 3, 2, 1, go! With resolve burning in his heart, he dashed forward, ready to confront whatever shadows awaited them in the dark. Morrison dashed forward, heart pounding and adrenaline coursing through his veins. The chaos erupted around him as bullets ricocheted off metal and cement, the air thick with gunpowder and tension. He could feel the weight of his team's expectations. This was no longer just about taking down a contractor. It was about survival. "Take cover behind that wall," he shouted to his teammates, pointing to a crumbling brick wall that provided some semblance of shelter. They ducked just in time as another volley of shots flew past, splintering the alley with deafening clamor. As Morrison crouched behind the wall, he dared a glance at the armed men clad in dark suits. Their movements were efficient and calculated, the way their guns glinted under the muted light of the alley suggesting they were trained professionals. But who were they? More importantly, how far did their reach extend? "On my mark," he whispered to his team, seeing the resolve in their eyes. "We need to create a diversion to get closer. Phillips, can you toss something to distract them?" Phillips nodded, his hands already moving to grab a discarded canister nearby. "Ready when you are." "Now!" Morrison yelled, and Phillips hurled the canister toward the opposite side of the alley. It clattered loudly against the pavement and rolled into the shadows, drawing the gunman's attention. In that split second, Morrison surged forward, gesturing for his team to follow. With heightened urgency, they made their way toward the nearest cover, a shabby vehicle that had seen better days. As they reached the car, Morrison had the fleeting thought that this was the moment they would either cement their bravery or pay the ultimate price for their mission. He crouched behind the car's hood, peering out to see a moment of confusion in the ranks of the suited men. "Move! Now!" he shouted again, and together they advanced, inching closer to the unexpected adversaries. Morrison could feel his pulse quickening as he realized their approach had gone unnoticed. Perhaps they underestimated their resolve. Suddenly, a shout echoed in the alley. "They are flanking us!" The urgency in the voice resonated like a gong, snapping Morrison back to reality. He dared not look back, but knew they had little time before reinforcements arrived. "Keep pushing forward," he directed, his voice cutting through the chaos as they pressed onward. Just as they reached the doorway leading out of the alley, the gunmen regained their composure, regrouping and aiming their weapons toward Morrison and his team. Then, unexpectedly, a shot rang out, but it wasn't from the gunman. An explosion erupted from the far end of the alley, obscuring the vision of both sides in a cloud of dust and debris. The sheer surprise jolted everyone, and amidst confusion, Morrison found an opening. "Now! Go!" He sprinted through the doorway, pulling his teammates in behind him, the noise of the chaotic alley receding until only the pounding in his heart remained. Inside, they found themselves in a dimly lit stairwell, the walls damp and chipped. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, which contrasted sharply with the adrenaline still surging through them. Morrison quickly scanned the area, desperate for direction. "Up," he directed without hesitation, leading the team to the stairs. They ascended with urgency, moving rapidly but quietly, aware that they were not out of danger yet. Reaching the second floor, Morrison paused to catch his breath. "We need to figure out our next move. We can't go back down the way we came." The tense silence enveloped them, broken only by the distant sirens and the slow, echoing sounds of footsteps. As they gathered around him, Morrison pulled out his phone to check their communications. Frustration welled again as he noticed multiple alerts. "The situation outside is escalating. We need to monitor any updates on those gunmen while we plan our next steps." "Let's review what we know about the contractor," El Coyote suggested, looking through the remains of their previous intel. "If he was meeting with these men, they're likely connected to that network we suspected was behind the corruption. They might open up a path to the higher-ups." In that moment, the gravity of the situation settled on Morrison with renewed weight. Not only were they dealing with a rogue contractor, but now they were entangled in a larger web of conspiracy that threatened everything they fought to uphold. Just as they prepared to strategize, movement echoed from below, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching the stairwell. Morrison held up a hand, signaling for silence. He signaled to his team to find hiding spots, but he noticed in the corner of his eye that the door they had just exited was slowly creaking open. The men in dark suits had found them. "Morrison, we need to move," Phillips whispered urgently, lowering himself behind a stack of old crates. "We can't let them trap us here," Morrison replied, his mind racing. "We need a way out." Just then, a glint of light caught his eye, a narrow window at the end of the hallway, just within reach. "There! We can escape through there, but we need to move fast before they find us." With no time to lose, the team coordinated a quick plan. "We'll make a break for that window," Morrison declared. "El Coyote, you lead us out. The rest of us will cover you. If they follow, we hold them off long enough to escape." El Coyote nodded, and as their voices fell to a whisper, Morrison felt a surge of camaraderie, the kind that came from being in the heat of battle. They were a team, bound together by fate, and the labyrinth of betrayal couldn't tear them apart. When the footsteps drew closer, he urged them into action. "Now!" In a flurry, they moved, darting down the hall toward the window. Morrison pushed it open as quietly as he could, craning his neck to check the street below. It seemed clear, but danger remained ever present. "Go!" Morrison shouted, as El Coyote jumped first, landing with a soft thud on the ground below. The rest quickly followed, each landing safely but silently. Just as they began to retreat toward the cover of the adjacent alley, gunfire erupted from behind them. The team scattered, instincts kicking in as they ducked behind a parked car. "Now we're really cornered," Phillips grumbled, catching his breath. "What now?" Morrison's mind raced. The alley was a dead end, but their resolve ignited a spark of inspiration. "We make our own exit. There has to be another way out of this area. We'll cut through the buildings if we have to." Glancing at his teammates, he felt their determination align. With a brief nod of solidarity, Morrison led them further into the maze of the city. The night was dark, but as they rushed past the shadows, there was one recurring thought. There were answers waiting to be uncovered, and he was determined to unravel every thread of this conspiracy. As they pressed forward, Morrison realized that not only were they on the hunt for the contractor and the sinister figures that loomed in the shadows, but they were also racing against time. Faced with uncertainty and danger, he knew every decision could be a matter of life or death. With every echo of footsteps pursued them, this battle had only just begun. Morrison pressed on, the weight of urgency pushing him to the forefront of their escape. The alleyways twisted and turned like a labyrinth, but he barely noticed, his focus sharp as he navigated through the shadows. He could feel the tension in the air. Each step echoed the relentless pursuit behind them. "Keep your eyes peeled," he instructed his team as they skated past flickering streetlights. "We need to find a place to regroup and plan our next move." "Over there." El Coyote pointed to a small cafe, its sign dimly lit but the door still ajar. "We can slip in and hide." Morrison nodded. "In we go." Quietly. They ducked into the cafe, the smell of stale coffee assaulting their senses in an oddly comforting way amidst the chaos. The place was empty except for scattered chairs and tables, a forgotten relic that spoke of better days. They quickly chose a corner booth and huddled down, their breaths coming in hurried gasps. "Are they still following us?" Phillips asked, peering out the window, his eyes darting from side to side, searching for threats. "I can't tell," Morrison replied, straining to hear any distant voices or footsteps. "We need to lay low for a moment." As they caught their breath, Morrison's mind spiraled with questions. Who were those men? Why was a contractor aligned with them? He sensed a deeper plot at play, more sinister than he had anticipated. "Did you manage to get anything from the contractor's drop files?" he asked El Coyote, trying to regain a foothold in the chaos that surrounded them. "I didn't have the time to go through everything," El Coyote admitted, pulling out a small tablet and scanning its contents. "But I found some references to a meeting at an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront. If it's linked to these guys, maybe they're involved in the same operations." "Then we need to go there," Morrison stated, a determined glint in his eye. "This could be the break we need. But first, we need to lose anyone who might be on our trail." "There's a back exit," Phillips chimed in. "We can use that to slip out without drawing attention." "Good. Let's move," Morrison instructed, gathering his team. They crept toward the back of the cafe, stealthily avoiding any creaking floorboards that might give them away. As they reached the back door, Morrison pushed it open a crack and peered out. The alley behind the cafe appeared deserted. "All right, we can make a run for it," he said, signaling the others to follow. They hurried into the alley, scanning their surroundings cautiously. No footsteps echoed behind them, no distant shouts. It seemed momentarily quiet. "Stay close," Morrison urged as they sprinted toward the street. Once outside, they blended into the crowd, dark clothing and furtive glances keeping them hidden amongst the night's patrons and stragglers. Morrison guided his team toward a side street, calculating their moves while trying to remain aware of their surroundings. "Once we reach the waterfront, we need to be careful," he advised. "The warehouse is large, but it's likely they'll have guards. We may have the chance to gather more intel." As they approached the outskirts of the waterfront, a sense of foreboding washed over him. The moonlight glinted off the water, casting eerie shadows across the dilapidated structures that lined the shore. But as they neared the warehouse, something felt peculiar. The atmosphere shifted, tension palpable in the air. "Stay sharp," Morrison whispered. "If there's security, they'll be watching the entrances." The team circled the perimeter of the building, looking for any signs of access. El Coyote found a side entrance, rusty and barely ajar but just large enough for them to slip through. The hinges creaked ominously as they nudged the door open, tense with anticipation. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous, with tall ceilings that stretched into darkness. Dust motes hung suspended in the air, illuminated by beams of moonlight that snuck through broken windows. They moved cautiously, footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dirt on the ground. "Let's find a place to observe," Morrison suggested, leading them deeper into the shadows. They parked themselves behind a stack of pallets, peering through the gaps toward the center of the warehouse, where a low hum of voices drifted toward them. Suddenly, the lights flickered on, and Morrison's breath hitched as he saw the contractor standing confidently at the center of a semicircle comprised of the dark-suited men. A projector whirred to life and cast images against the far wall, a series of maps and diagrams that detailed elaborate plans. "Looks like we found them," El Coyote whispered, his eyes wide as he leaned closer. "What are they discussing?" Morrison strained to hear, catching snippets of their conversation. "Shipments expected next week. Local law enforcement is compromised. Secure the coordinates. This operation cannot be traced back." Each new piece of information felt like a key unlocking a door to a conspiracy far more extensive than he could have imagined. He needed to record this, to gather proof. Quietly, he retrieved his phone and began recording the proceedings, knowing they'd need it as evidence. But just as he turned to signal for quiet, a shadow fell across the entrance. The unmistakable shape of a man mingled with the darkness, scanning the area. Morrison's heart raced. "Cover!" he hissed as they all instinctively crouched, pressing back against the pallets. The shadow moved closer, a figure emerging from the door, a guard, alive to the presence of intruders. Morrison felt time slow as a man's gaze swept the area. He motioned for his team to remain still, holding his breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. Each second felt like an eternity, tension thickening until it almost hurt. Just then, the guard's radio crackled to life, cutting through the silence. "All clear on this end," the voice crackled. "We're expecting a shipment, and we have reports of intruders on the other side." Morrison's grip tightened on his phone, weighing the dangers of their next move. If they were discovered now, their chances would evaporate. But if they remained, they'd miss the critical intel they desperately needed. With a single nod, Morrison gestured for El Coyote to create a diversion. "When I say go, make some noise to draw his attention," he instructed, knowing they had to act fast. "Ready?" El Coyote replied, clenching his fists in anticipation. "Go!" Morrison whispered, and El Coyote sprang up from behind the pallets, kicking over some crates with a loud crash. The noise reverberated through the storage area, echoing in stark contrast to the whispered plans further inside. The guard whipped around, eyes wide as he rushed toward the source of the commotion. "What was that?" he barked, alarmed. This was their moment. "Now!" Morrison yelled, and he and the rest of the team charged into motion. They sprinted toward the area where the contractor and his accomplices huddled, hoping to catch them before they could react. The contractor looked up, expression morphing into shock as they burst into view, weapons drawn. "Intruders!" he shouted, panic rippling through the gathered men. Chaos erupted as both sides reacted. Morrison saw the contractor's eyes narrow, instinctively grasping for a weapon. "Get them!" he commanded to his men, igniting a frenzy of movement that mirrored their earlier confrontation. Morrison fired his weapon into the air to assert control. "Back off!" he shouted, keeping his aim steady. "This ends here." The dark-suited men hesitated, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Morrison saw an opportunity, a chance to stall while they formulated a plan. "Your operation is crumbling," he declared, voice resolute. "You're surrounded, and there's nowhere left to run. We know what you've been planning. It's over." The contractor sneered but didn't back down. "You think this is over, Morrison? This is just the beginning. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Just then, an unexpected sound filled the air, a distant siren, growing louder. Morrison's heart dropped. Time wasn't on their side. "It doesn't have to end in violence," Morrison urged, hoping to de-escalate. "You have a chance to walk away." "Walk away," the contractor laughed, eyes glinting with manic determination. "Do you really think I'll let you have the last word?" In that moment, the warehouse erupted into a cacophony of gunfire. Morrison and his team fired back, narrowly dodging bullets as the fight intensified, their world cloaked in chaos and spraying sparks of conflict. "We can't let them escape," he shouted, pushing instinctively forward. The room became a flurry of movement. Morrison focused on remaining calm, laser-focused. He aimed, fired, and reloaded in a fluid motion, leading his team with fierce determination. This battle was about more than just survival. It was about bringing justice to a hidden world where shadows relied on secrecy. Just as the tide of the struggle began to shift in their favor, Morrison caught movement from the corner of his eye. The contractor darting toward a concealed exit, desperation driving his actions. After him! Morrison yelled, urging the team to follow as he chased after the fleeing figure. Adrenaline surged as he navigated through the chaos, dodging debris and gunfire. They had to cut him off before he slipped away. But as they pushed toward the back exit, Morrison's instinct screamed that something was brewing, a trap, a contingency set in place. The air crackled with tension when suddenly, a sharp explosion rocked the warehouse, flames licking at the walls as debris fell from the ceiling. The force sent Morrison sprawling, disorienting him as smoke filled the air, obscuring everything around him. Coughing and scrambling to his feet, he turned to find his teammates. "Is everyone okay?" he shouted, struggling to be heard over the creaking structure and the still echoing chaos. "We're right here," El Coyote replied, voice hoarse. "But there's no time. The contractor is getting away."